From the moment that Dillon's Rolling Western taught me how to perform one of the game's most important moves on the title screen, I knew I was in for a unique experience. Basically, the game sets out to do for the tower defense genre what Pikmin did for real-time strategy games. Instead of putting you in an abstract, godlike perspective like most tower defense games, you're instead given control of an armadillo called Dillon, who has to physically travel the landscape to gather supplies and build defenses to protect various towns from destruction. Okay, that was a lot to take in, so let's break it down. Dillon makes his living by traveling from town to town to help the inhabitants defend their cities from the relentless Grok army. Now, each town visit takes place over 3 days, and each day consists of 3 parts. Part 1 occurs during the day and is when you'll be gathering resources and building defenses. But in order to build defenses, you'll need to raise enough cash to actually construct weapon towers in some of the preset locations. Now, in order to earn cash, you can either hope to find some randomly by busting through rocks or by scavenging materials to sell from the mines scattered around each level. Once you've built some towers, you'll then have to equip them with weapons such as shotguns, Gatling guns, or cannons. Each weapon has a different power rating, target range, and of course, cost. Which means that you're fighting a constant battle of which weapons to place where and at what cost. And if that isn't enough, you might also want to comb the landscape for plants called scruffles, which can be fed to the town's livestock to increase their numbers. We'll get to why that's important in just a moment. So as you might have guessed, that's a lot to do, and there's still more we haven't even covered. And you only have a precious few minutes to do it all, because once dusk hits and the Groks appear, that means it's time for part 2, the battle phase. This is when the Groks make a beeline for the town and attempt to storm the gates. And if they manage to break through, they'll begin to devour your town's livestock. Which is why it was so important to grow your livestock's numbers earlier in the day, because once a number hits 0, it's game over. But hopefully it won't get to that point, because if you set up your weapon towers strategically, they'll help to thin the herd. Now, if there are areas where you didn't set up towers, or if they're not quite getting the job done, you can actually step up and attack the Groks directly as well. Each Grok on the overworld actually represents a small group of them. Once you touch one, you'll be moved to a small battle arena where you'll have to take out the entire group in order to clear it from the map. You have several attacks at your disposal, but the faster, more powerful ones also yield less items, which is probably a fair trade-off considering you usually want to get out of there as soon as possible since the other Grok units continue their movement on the overworld even during battle. This means that the town and your weapon towers are still vulnerable. Luckily, the game will alert you if they come under attack, but sometimes it's too late, so every second counts. In addition to using the weapon towers and taking on the Groks directly, you can also use items, like bombs, against them on the overworld too, assuming you stocked up before the town's gates closed at dusk. Needless to say, you have a lot of options at your disposal, and we still haven't covered them all. It all adds up to an incredibly frantic, intense experience as you manage your resources, repair damaged towers, and race around the map defeating dangerous Groks before they wreak havoc on your town. But if you pull it off, the feeling of satisfaction that washes over you is nearly unparalleled, and you feel that every time you successfully end a day. And that leads us to part 3 of the day, and where else would you spend it but at the local tavern? Here you can buy better supplies, practice your skills, restore your health with a nice meal, and engage in quests that will have you searching the landscape for hidden treasure. It's a nice, relaxing, and rewarding way to end the day. That is, until you have to repeat the entire process for 2 more days. It's not easy being a ranger. Now that the overview's out of the way, it's time to talk about how it actually plays. Let me just address that outright. It plays pretty damn well. I mean, I probably wouldn't have spent as much time describing the game as I did if I didn't actually enjoy it. As I alluded to at the start of the video, the game hooked me right off the bat with its unique form of locomotion. As you've probably noticed, you spend much of your time rolling around, and you do this by dragging the stylus back on the touchscreen, then releasing, as if you were winding up a toy car. This simple method of controlling Dillon's speed actually makes the act of traveling itself fun and engaging. In fact, the touchscreen is used to great effect throughout the game, as it's also your primary means of attacking. Tap an enemy after rolling into them for a claw attack, or keep the stylus held down to grind into them. The touchscreen also serves a second, extremely important purpose. It displays a map of the entire level. And unfortunately, this is where the game starts to run into a little bit of trouble. Basically, the map itself and everything on it is too darn small. This forces you to tap on almost everything just to see what it is. It also doesn't display quite enough information by default, forcing you to pause the game to view which towers need to be repaired, among other things. And since that's important information, you'll be pausing the game often, which damages the pace. I would have also liked a little more control over the use of my resources. For instance, why can't I choose how much to repair a tower instead of having to repair it to its full amount? There are a few other small issues, like the touchscreen controlled menus that aren't actually displayed on the touchscreen that occasionally interfere, but the core gameplay is strong enough to make bearing with these issues more than worthwhile. Particularly since the game has so much content to offer, throwing new abilities and enemy types at you constantly. The game also features some of the strongest sense of 3D yet, giving real depth to the expansive landscapes. Now, I will say that the game's a bit of an acquired taste. I mean, the gameplay is unlike anything I've seen before, and it takes some getting used to. But once everything clicked into place, it actually became one of the most rewarding and addictive experiences I've had on the 3DS yet, even if it's not perfect. which is why I would love to see a sequel. There's an extremely solid foundation here that with just a few tweaks can make for an even better experience. But even as is, it's still one of the best experiences the 3DS eShop has to offer, which is why I'm giving it 4 stars out of 5. Hopefully you enjoyed our take on Dillon's Rolling Western. Now make sure to check out GameXplain.com for more reviews, previews, and video guides.